for it.
Well, Elton, thank you so much for helping my project. Can you say a little bit about yourself?
Hey, my name is Elton. I'm a 23-year-old management consultant from Atlanta, Georgia. Um, I graduated from college last year with a bachelor's in electrical engineering. Been interested in space since I was a kid. Worked in space for a few years while I was a student in college, and I'm trying to keep track of what's going on. And I'm excited to see if Artemis happens the next 4 years.
So what kind of things did you do in space in college?
Yeah, sure. So I was an undergrad at Harvard. So I graduated from Harvard in 2019, studied electrical engineering, and I was involved in a couple of different things. So I was involved in our SETS chapter, Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. It was a club that we had for just general space interest. Took a class in space engineering when I was a senior to wrap things up. In spring of one year, I did a lobbying with students on Capitol Hill. It's like a political lobbying organization for people interested in space to try to get Congress to do more space-friendly legislation. And then the most important, big thing I did was I was an aerospace engineering intern for a space startup called Analytical Space. It was founded in Cambridge by two HBS classmates, and the objective of that was to do optical data transfers for geospatial satellites. So the objective of that was to greatly reduce the amount of time it took for satellite imagery to reach the ground. So it has huge implications for the commercial and military spaces. And the way they did that was, instead of using your traditional radio communications, they wanted to use lasers to beam the data down. It's a super cool emerging technology, and they're doing quite well from what I can understand right now. So it's exciting to see where they'll be even in 4 years.
That is exciting. And now with your management consulting, are you doing any consulting for aerospace firms?
Yeah, so I've done some. I did one project, which was a merger for some aerospace defense firms in my first even 6 months working there. I've also done some proposals for public sector space projects as well. I'm trying to get back into it right now. I get pulled around to different sectors and practice areas as is needed, but I'd like to return to space sometime.
Um, and I don't quite see the direct connection between aerospace engineering and management consulting. It seems like your career path took a interesting kind of switch. Care to talk about that any?
I think I have a background in engineering, but I didn't. I guess for better or for worse, one of the big things about space and aero is if you get put in the trenches as an engineer, you work on the same project for probably 10 years doing the same thing, which is necessary. You need to have a continuity of people. But I just wanted to, hop around, do a lot of really different things. And the objective is maybe at some point in the future to return to the industry, starting up my own venture or helping something out and helping lead or manage something like that. But it's up in the air.
Yeah, I face the same challenges too. I work for a software company doing something completely unrelated to space, but it's a big passion of mine. And everybody's like, "You should go get a job at SpaceX." I'm like, "Well, then I'd be like really stuck in that one place." And
Mhm.
I kind of
Yeah,
like being on the outside where I'm not beholden to anybody and get to cheer everybody on. So
yeah,
um,
yeah. Not pigeonholed.
exactly. So when did you find out we were going to the moon in 2024?
Kind of. Ooh. No, I'm not sure when I found out when it was accurate, but I have to say it probably be sometime in the past year or so when the Artemis project was announced. And I've been familiar with the SLS program for several years, but I think it had to have been sometime in the range of this past year where I heard that the interest was in bringing humans to the moon by the end of 2024.
Yeah, I've been interviewing a lot of space people since I've moved things online. But originally, I was interviewing people at the coffee shop and at the malls and at the airports and just wherever I happen to be. And most everyday people don't know we're going to the moon.
It hasn't been, I would say, well, maybe well communicated. And I think a lot of people have other day-to-day things that they consider they interest. And also, I think we've also reached a point now, as compared to maybe 60 years ago, where a lot of human manned activities in space are seen as mundane or daily. Like, you reflect on how many rocket launches we have for satellites. Like, we have like 2 or 3 a week, and it's just routine now, and no one seems to reflect or consider how spectacular that is. And I think a lot of people consider, oh, humans on the moon in 24. Well, if we could do it in 69, like, what's the big deal? Without recognizing that it's still a lot, even with digital technology, even with semiconductors and supercomputers. Like, just not having any institutional knowledge and rebuilding all of that rocketry and tech is a big deal. Now, people take it for granted, and also it's 2020. People have a lot of thoughts on their mind.
Indeed. Um, and actually, yesterday we had an aerospace record set. The highest number of scrubs in a 24-hour period. We had 3 different missions.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah, there's like, I remember seeing my space news emails, like the Delta 4 rocket got scrubbed, and I remember seeing a lot of scrub emails.
The SpaceX and Northrop Grumman as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. Um, SLS, so you've been following that for a while. I've been following that for a while too. Some people call it the Senate launch system, and uh, it seems better at getting money delivered to certain places than astronauts. And I was wondering, as a management consultant, if you had some insights into maybe how that project could have gone differently.
I, I don't have tons of, I think, detail or even or maybe back end thing that you're interested in. But to me, it's just, on the one hand, I think it's important to recognize that like a lot of big rocketry and aero projects like become like very like aspirational mega goals set by people in Congress or people who don't have the technical know-how. Like, immediately, like the F-35 springs to mind, like best like air superiority fighter probably ever designed by man. But oh my God, does it go over budget? It can do things no one else has ever considered a fighter jet could do, but it costs a huge chunk of change. And I think and it's really complicated. And I think SLS falls into the same group where, I mean, I'm reflecting back to the Obama administration, even where the objective of SLS was humans on asteroids, and then when you change that to humans on moon, that's an entirely different mission parameter. And I'm presuming that people building SLS had to change the rocket again, and it's part of this political pendulum you see back and forth, where the Trump administration says moon, the Obama administration says asteroid Mars, the Bush administration says moon, and I mean, these projects take longer than the 4 to 8 years you have for a single elected president. And when space becomes a political crown jewel, and it's a super cool achievement. You see things get whiplashed, and there's just not enough time in my mind for these projects to really go. I think if they were better insulated from politics, that would help, and the whims of the administration. But that's not to say also that it's pretty apparent as well that if you can become like a big prime contractor for this thing and you can sort of like sit on it, it can be quite lucrative and a guaranteed revenue stream, to put it diplomatically.
It could keep you afloat when you have trouble with your other lines of business, I suppose.
It's true. If you're a Boeing, it's good to have some government contracts in the pipe.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem I have with the SLS is like the companies behind it, they were really anti-competitive in terms of SpaceX and
Mm-hmm.
what have you, with like the idea of why you're giving money to them. We know how to build rockets, and and then like the lobbying and the advertising all, some of it kind of like stealth mode, a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt articles and stuff.
Yeah, that even reflects this is something that I actually had some more personal background in. Is even it's like, if you think about, there's a lot of discussion in 2020 about, decaying of political and public institutions, but once you what comes to mind in this anti-competitiveness is Doug Lavero, the director of human spaceflight NASA, retiring from his position um, because it was anti-competitiveness. He provided extra information to Boeing in the middle of a bid round, which is just a ridiculous no-no. And like, you understand that yes, this person like Lavero wanted our objective of Moon 2024 to happen, but he also did it in such a way that favored a very old school approach to building a rocket that he really wanted, which was the single big rocket that launches from the ground instead of what everyone else can do now with modern space practice, which is you assemble the rocket in orbit. It's cheaper, it's faster, you get a better product. Um, yeah, yeah, I agree.
I have Doug actually is probably one of the biggest contributors to making this project happen because of his little lapel pin of counting down the days to the end of 24 and his daily hero of the day. In December, I got like this flash of insight of just interviewing everyday people. But now Doug's gone, but I'm planning to stick in to the end. So
Of course, yeah, yeah, it was a shame too. I've been in a call with him before. Um, yeah, he seems like a nice guy, but there was a lapse in judgment.
yeah, he was too razor focused on the date and not making sure that he was following
The process,
the process.
yeah,
But it's interesting, even though you had a powerful leader and you had people in the House pushing for an integrated landing system, which have favored Boeing as well, you still saw the three HLS contracts go to um, completely
still,
different players.
yeah. I admit I'm not familiar with the lander, everything behind the lander, so I'll have to. I can't say anything intelligent on that, but if I just hope they can coordinate amongst themselves. Um, that's just going to be the big thing in engineering projects like that is coordinating the inputs and the outputs and making sure they match. Like if you have, imagine something like a gusset or like a connection node is just not the right size. Like things will break. Like reflect back to the Mars Climate Observatory lander, where the subcontractor was using what foot-pounds, and NASA had specified kilonewtons
Hmm.
in their statement of work, and then the lander crashed. Like it's the kind of stuff you have when you have so many different people working on it. Just hope they're careful.
I know. I wonder how many billions of dollars or maybe even trillions of dollars would save if we just, as a society, moved over to the metric system.
Yeah, this is like less related to the moon, but I try to force myself to use metric as much as I can in daily life. I try to look at weights and kilos. I always do temperature and centigrade. Um, Distance is a little tougher because car odometers are always in miles. Every sign is in miles. So just doing 2.2 kilometers in a mile kind of is untenable in the United States. But agreed.
So what do you think about us returning back to the moon? I mean, like, how does it fit into your world?
I think for I mean I think this is something you probably hear the same thing from space junkies, right? Like it's just cool. Like I was born in 1997, so Apollo was just about 3 decades before my time. I never saw any of that, and the the implication that that could be something we see, aided by newest chip technology, newest computer technology, life support technology, and being able to watch it in like digital quality, not like some grainy like Apollo film that a conspiracy theorist will say is like fake. Like being able to see that in HD, I think would be super super motivating. And when it comes to this vision that people have for the new space economy or space being considered a routine platform for commerce, that is a huge part of it. We consider interest in NASA's deep space network or building like an orbital platform around the moon, or even an orbiting platform for constructing a spacecraft to reach Mars. Like I think it's a big deal to giving us that technical and operational know-how to reach those larger objectives. And I'm sure there's even, there's the scientific dimension to it, which is we've done tons and tons of great work since the Apollo era. And yeah, there's plenty of rocks back here at Earth, but I'm not a scientist, but I am certain there are 4 or 5 decades worth of people thinking, oh, if only we could get back up there, we could find this out in the hopper. This would be the perfect opportunity for a crew of astronauts to go out there and do it. And then, of course, it's inspirational to see something like that. It'd be nice to see humanity do something together and not as fractious as things have been for the past several years. Of course, who knows? Maybe this will become some ridiculous partisan flexing effort, but I hope not. Space has generally been pretty good at avoiding the politics of those of us who are lesser and remain on the planet, but you can never be sure.
This is true. And I think it's kind of an interesting contrast. Whenever Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, he talked about doing it for all mankind, but yet it was a completely American enterprise. But this time with our return to the moon, it's really an international enterprise. I mean, we got like the JAXA, the Japanese space agency, is put in like a request for the biggest increase ever in their um, uh, space plans in order to help support Artemis. You have Canada doing the Canadian arm. You have, I think, several European countries and supporting it and what have you. And so like now this really is going to be a multinational effort, but we're sort of in this America first rhetoric. It's kind of it's like we got the first time we had our words right, but our actions were kind of different. This time we have our actions kind of right, but our words are very much different.
Yeah, that's a really interesting contrast. Actually, I admit to you, I didn't know that we had so many other agencies that were involved in the Artemis project. I had assumed, like you pointed out, like given the rhetoric and the background and the political backing for the project, it was an entirely American launch again. But the fact that it's a multinational effort right now I find really exciting, and I'm really glad to hear that that's the case. I mean, of course, I'm presuming they're all Western Bloc countries, so there's no China or Russia on the project, but I can't have it all.
Yeah, no China or Russia. That is true. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think our relationship with China is a little bit different than it was with the Soviet Union. Um, our economies were almost completely partitioned. We were at a state of continuous war, and uh, it was kind of. But I think there's a somewhat, in some respect, maybe a little bit more comfort because we understood the conflict better. But maybe that's just because I didn't grow up in that time and afterwards.
Right.
But with China, I mean, our economies are merged together, and the conflict is very. I mean, I think there's a heightened level of uh, kind of unease with like everything. It's like I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But whenever it comes to space, it's like completely separate, nothing there. Whereas with the
Yeah.
Soviet Union, we actually had some coordination.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there were mutual interests, and it was, I think, like a good platform for showcasing some sort of collaboration. But for the Chinese, like, if I recall, like Chinese nationals, a lot of them can't even get access to NASA facilities under congressional, like federal law, due to concerns born out of espionage, and like they don't get a slot in the ISS. That's why they're building their own. Like, we don't provide them any rocketry assistance, no dual use technologies. Period. They're building their own GPS constellation, Beidou, to fill that niche for GPS, which is, I mean, they do have to do that though if they want their own military GPS capabilities, because then they could be like the Russians, then we turn off the GPS when they need it. So that that's a fairly recognizable importance for China, but it's very interesting, especially consider the the status of the warring U.S. and Chinese spy networks right now. It's, I think, possibly the hottest and most aggressive war of espionage, cyber espionage in person since the height of the Cold War. And the fact that we trade with each other makes it so much tougher. And there's just not a whole lot of goodwill, I think, that could be used to be building anything in space. And like I'm part Chinese myself, and it's very interesting to watch it unfold in real time. When I've been there, have a family there, enjoy spending time in country. It's just funny to think about because I think to even tie it to space, like it's like very clearly like the Chinese space program is like an arm of the People's Liberation Army, like missiles and rocket group. Like it is a military enterprise. It's not NASA where it's very focused on civilian administration, civilian led, like general projects. Like they're doing it to launch spy satellites. It's to launch military satellites. It's anti-satellite missile capability. It's not very overtly I don't know how much they pretend that it's a peaceful mission, to be frank, which is fine. Like they do have their own like security interests in that, but it's a completely different framework for leadership and management.
Yeah, talking about a different framework, you were talking about the challenges NASA has with every 4 to 8 years, change in administration and kind of, the goal keeps moving. Um, China doesn't have that problem. They have like these decade-long plans that they can march to for decades long. You
Yeah,
know, it's kind of,
yeah, it's as one of the perks of a authoritarian one party rule government is that you can, yeah, right, like you said, right on schedule. New 5 year plan, new 10 year plan comes out, and then the party has their instructions right from the top, and then they execute. Whereas here, we're a democracy, so people cycle out, people argue. It takes forever to reach any sort of consensus that everyone can agree upon and do things. Of course, as an American, I will say I prefer our way. There are a lot of things I like about it, despite all the complaints, because you don't realize how good you have it until you go somewhere else it doesn't. But yeah, that continuity of government image, it does help when you have a space program. And I think, especially even now, like reflecting back to the space program from the heyday of the U.S., like a lot of those space program achievements were very closely interlinked with our rocketry programs, our missile programs, and it was easy to sell each successive administration on like, yes, this is what NASA's been doing. We'd like to continue that. Also, like the people love it, so we can keep going. Whereas here, when you have even fundamental disagreements on how to handle American rivals like Russia and China in a way that isn't just completely overtly on the warpath, but also isn't just giving them the keys to the castle. And every single president has a different perspective on how that should be done best. It's hard to manage that.
exactly. And plus everyone wants their Kennedy moment, where they're like going, we choose to go to the moon, and have that like replayed forever after they leave office. And it's like, oh, I'm the one that got them there.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Presidents always want their soundbite moment. I mean, even reflecting back, I don't know of any president that's given a speech like that since the Kennedy administration that's been so well recognized. Like, I mean, there have been speeches that are famous, but like nothing that people can quote, verbatim. Like, going back to through all the Clintons, all the Bushes, the Obama administration, the Carter administration, like you just don't have it.
yeah. Um, well, if it was safe and affordable, would you have an interest in going into space?
Yeah, why not? If it's safe and affordable, like why wouldn't you do it? It's
Uh,
like it's.
some people are scared of planes and heights and that type of thing.
I mean, fair. I guess the operative word being safe here. I mean, even if it were less safe, I would still do it. I think it's exciting. It's a risk. It feels like sometimes this may personally be me, but I'm sure there's other people who have this where you feel like that wanderlust of like, oh man, there's no good adventures out there anymore in the world. Like we already went to Antarctica, we've already explored like all the rugged pioneer lands, and well, what's left for me to do? Well, there's space. It's expensive, but yeah, I totally do it. I think it'd be just freaking cool. So no question, no question.
Would you participate in like a reality TV show?
What like Mars One?
Well, not Mars One. Mars One, that was, um,
Yeah, we all know what that was.
but I see more like a Space Hero. It's something that hit the news a few weeks ago that's currently in the works. Axiom Aerospace is going to be the one that actually manages the logistics for the winner to the ISS, and they're like a legitimate company. They actually have a
Good.
contract with SpaceX for a private Dragon mission to the ISS. They're also working to send like Tom Cruise and the film director up there next year. Um, and I know one of the like spokespersons for it. He was our guest speaker at our North Houston Space Society chapter meeting last month. So not a scam, but also I think not fully funded either. So there's that. But I think they can make it real. So I'm kind of excited about um, the potential of really engaging people at a personal level about space. I mean, it's a big difference about you talk to about sending astronauts and they're like, well, what about poverty and climate change? And you talk about, well, possibly sending you, and they're like, okay, where do I sign up? It's like complete shift.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, sure. Why not? I don't know what kind of reality TV we're talking here. I'm generally I could be pretty critical of media culture sometimes, but I again, yeah, I think it'd be cool, especially if space is just more democratized in general. People see it impacts their daily lives and beyond just the high bid projects. Of course, I do feel like a lot of people who say like, "What about the climate change and poverty and stuff like that?" are being honestly kind of disingenuous because they just don't support space in general or are looking for something else because you consider all the scientific achievements and the engineering quality of life that comes out of the space program, especially because all these inventions become public domain if NASA does it because you paid for it. That's a really, really powerful tool. Um, but that's a digression. Yeah, I go for it.
And no, I totally agree with you. I mean, because whenever you start talking about whatever issue they bring up, it's like, well, what would it take to actually do that? And, how does not doing space keep those things from happening? And, you like kind of work with them on whatever their issue that Trump space is. And, what you find there's no, I mean, there was half the world's population in 1969. Nobody had personal computers. There was no internet that was there. I mean, it's just like the world, like we have twice the number of brains that are better connected today. We should be able to do everything.
Yeah, even there's one thing that I think caught my attention too was you consider even how much this costs. Budget for NASA just hovers around $30 billion a year. It's less than 10% of the annual profit returned by Apple each year. I feel like this is worth 10% of the value Apple delivers to its shareholders each year. I mean, you consider poverty and all that. These are big problems, but NASA does a lot with a shoestring budget. And I think taking away that tiny little pebble, it's not worth it. It's not going to solve the problem.
And it's even more of a shoestring than that. It's like 22 billion.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
I know.
it's not a lot. It really isn't, and it does. We work a lot with it. I think we should maintain it. Of course, I'll be the person who says give them more, but I I don't write the checks.
And Jeff Bezos, his space company Blue Origin has a very interesting funding model. I mean, he sells $1 billion a year of his Amazon stock to fund it. I mean, that's 1/22nd of the funding of NASA. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of shows you how small it is.
Yeah, it's and it also just you for I think initially you consider the private space enterprise. That's mind-boggling. Only states have the like the amount of resources and technology to fund that. But no, I think it's twin wings of NASA doesn't have a ton of money, action reality, and also just there are a lot of very wealthy Americans right now with an interest in that. It's where you get this cool dynamic.
Yeah, they definitely have a different motivation than like Boeing's and Lockheed's. They're like, we're gonna get there.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to shake things up. Yeah, it's good. It's always good to put some pressure on the old giants. I'm saying this as someone who has worked with old giants and does have respect for some of the work they do. It's good to get a little bit of external pressure, force some innovation.
Indeed. Well, I see we're at the top of the time. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I think we went to a lot of different places on just space and Artemis in general, and I think that was pretty nice, concise summary of my thoughts the past 30. So thank you for doing this, Nathan. This is super, super cool. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for participating. And if you know anybody else that would be willing to have a conversation about space, send them my way.
Of course, yeah, I'll mention it to my space buddies. See what they say.
Awesome. Well, you have a good rest of your day then.
You too, Nathan. Have a good day.